Is there any knowledge as to how long ago they were on the Earth, or what type of communities they were a part of?
Certainly, yes. I mean, it varies obviously all across the country because it's so vast, North America, that we have extremely old remains that are quite tall, 6'5" to 7 foot, down in Nevada. We with the Lovelock Cave discoveries and Humboldt Lake and places like this. Also on Catalina Island, and the other Channel Islands off the coast of California. Even going down into the Sonora Desert in Mexico as well. There was many discoveries, and the Smithsonian were involved with them. So we think these might have been an older culture, especially in the Nevada area, dating back to around 6 or 7 thousand years ago. And then, the Adena culture, probably around 1000 BC to, 500 AD, something like that. They were a very powerful, strongly built culture. Many of them were giants in the Ohio Valley area and West Virginia and that whole kind of Midwest area. Sorry, the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, places like this going up to the lakes. And some of them were giants. I mean, what we find as well in the Carolinas, for instance, and this is prevalent pretty much all over the country. They were kind of like an elite kind of shamanic leadership of the tribes. They even often had separate villages. This is something that Greg Little was telling me about. He's a brilliant author and researcher, based in I forget where he's based actually, Memphis, I think, and he was basically telling me, it's also in his Path of Souls book, that they almost have separate villages. So there was like these tribal leaders of these giants of 7 and 8 foot tall, and some of them existed up until the 1900s, and they were witnessed. And so this really blew our mind when we started looking into this, because there were live giants being witnessed from the 1500s by the Spanish explorers all the way up to the early 1900s by the presidents of the United States. Wow. We have a chapter called Early Explorers where we look at that, and who witnessed them and wrote it in their diaries and things like this, including Sir Francis Drake, all the famous Spanish explorers, Captain John Smith, and so on and so forth. And then we have the presidents who witnessed the Osage Indians, who were over 7 foot tall and powerfully built. They were described as like a royal class. And so the list goes on. The more you look into it, it's not just bones found in mounds. There's a lot more to this. There's eyewitness accounts. You start looking at the legends and the oral history of various Native American tribes, and it all jumps out at you. There's some real truth emerging, which is kind of shedding a whole new light on the true history of North America.
And I thank you for sharing that, because we never hear about that here in the United States. So I'm glad this is being brought out to the surface. Now, you had mentioned the mounds. Now, here in the Ohio Valley, I'm in Roanoke, Virginia, so I'm right next to West Virginia and pretty close to Ohio. In the Ohio Valley, is that where the Serpent Mounds are? And was there any evidence there?
Yes, actually, yes, there is. I mean, that's all the same kind of culture. It's all the same, that whole area we're talking about here. When it's all divided up now into different counties and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't then. Probably they probably had different variations on that. But yeah, the Serpent Mound. Ross Hamilton's done a ton of brilliant research on the Serpent Mound. But I went up there in 2012. Actually, hung out with Ross and another researcher called Jeffrey Wilson, and yeah, I mean, directly in the Serpent Mound itself, no, there weren't any giant skeletons found, but the mounds around it, some very tall, they were described as very tall ones, were found. There's even a 7 foot one was found and reported by Frederick Putnam. It was really the only excavator there, like in the late 1800s or early 1900s, and these were described as very powerful jaws. They were often sometimes extra teeth were mentioned, the supernumerary teeth phenomenon, double rows of teeth and things like this. But as you spread out and go through Ohio and West Virginia, that is like the hub. That is like the capital city of giants. That whole area, and like everything else, it gets less and less the more you spread out. But it literally, the giant discoveries have been found across the whole country. And we worked with a researcher called Cecilia Hall, and she helped us put a database together on Google Earth, and we so at the end of the book, we put like a gazetteer of all the giant accounts in the book, and the whole country's covered. It's like,
Wow.
it's not just one area, and so we're talking about a continent here virtually. It's not just like, it's like the entire part of Europe, part of Russia is the same size. You know what I mean? And so, you know, we're talking a massive culture that stretched over epochs of time, and it must have this amazing history. Yet it's completely written out of the history books.
Yeah.
It's just not there. And we just can't believe it. I mean, I'm an Englishman who just got interested in it, and it blew me away. And so me and Jim just decided to put our heads together and just do a book about it because it's so compelling. And there's so many different angles to take. I mean, we went in it from the angle of ancient sites because we're both fascinated by these ancient sites. The more you look into it, the more you find the giants. And it's, well, actually, they must have built them then. Well, they were certainly involved. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on there. And I mean, our book, I mean, we did as much research as we could, but more discoveries are being made. More newspapers and journals and old diaries have been put online. More people are going through microfilm in their local libraries from the 1800s and finding more photos and accounts and discoveries. And so, yeah, it's like a team effort. We encourage people to do their own research and share it about. And let's get this out there. And hopefully we'll get to a point where you can't be ignored by academia.
Yeah, yeah.
Be taken seriously for once.
And academia has a way of ignoring things that they're not comfortable with, don't they?
Absolutely.
You mentioned sacred sites in America, and that's a funny thing for me to hear because either they're not spoken about, or they're not, or they've just been plowed over and turned into a strip mall or something, or a condominium. But how many sacred sites have you heard of in the United States? I know this is kind of your specialty, sacred sites. The only thing we know of is the Serpent Mounds and maybe the American Stonehenge and some of the things that we might find up in New England. But is there more than we're being told? Have you seen or been able to visit or heard about any more sacred sites in the United States?
Yeah, I've travelled around quite a lot actually. Been on a few road trips with various people, and just I loved it. I mean, New England is fascinating because that's where Jim's based. I've got a whole network of friends up there. So when me and Jim were working on the book, we were travelling to lots of sites. But up there, you have mainly megalithic chambers, like they're like burial chambers, or what we call long barrows, or you know, and they're made of stone, dry stone walling with big roof slabs and doorways. And these are very interesting. They've got very powerful energetic effects that have been recorded scientifically. And in New York State, we have it as well. As a friend of mine, Renee Fleury, she works in the whole Ninham State Park area and all the megalithic sites there. There's a couple of stone circles. There's massive monoliths all over New England, all the way to Martha's Vineyard. There's a dolmen where they found a giant. There's Dolmen just north of Boston, and so on and so forth. In New York State, in North Salem, you have one of the biggest dolmens in the world, which is just, I couldn't believe it when I went there. I was like, what the hell is this? This is like something you find in Europe, something you find in like Ireland or something like that. It's got an 80 or 90 ton capstone with these quartz boulders underneath it, perched on this magnetic anomaly in this beautiful area, and no one talks about it, you know, and no one mentions it. And I'm like, well, come on. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. But when you head slightly west, if you carry on going west from New York State through Pennsylvania, you know, heading south a bit as well, you start hitting the mound culture sites. I mean, even in New York State, in western New York State, you do find various mounds there, giants have been discovered in. But when you reach sort of western Pennsylvania, and then West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, all that area. Then you go up north to Michigan and Wisconsin, and then the mounds are everywhere. I mean, there's 100,000 recorded earthworks, 100,000 plus. There are 10,000 known earthworks now that have survived, or more. I think just in the kind of that general area, all down the Mississippi, all the tributaries off it, going into Louisiana, Alabama, all the way to the Gulf Coast. Obviously, you go to the other side of the Gulf Coast, you start hitting the Olmec world. It's another area I've been exploring for a very long time. So it's crazy. And then you head right over to the west. All along the west coast, you find these huge midden and shell mounds going from right down near San Diego all the way up to the Canadian border. Some of them were huge. They had giants buried in them. You go onto Catalina Island and the Channel Islands. Catalina Island, there was a Spanish missionary back in the early 1600s wrote an account of a stone circle being on that island, and they were worshipping the sun god and doing all these rituals there. And so yeah, there's a lot going on. A lot of it's been destroyed though, but a lot of the major sites, the mound sites, you can still visit. But people just, I don't know what it is that people just don't. They're not promoted. They're
Yeah.
not in America. They're not people that haven't got that much interest in them. But when you look at them and you start looking at the maps and things like this, you realise they're incredibly sophisticated, as much as the ones in England are, or Britain, or Europe. You look at like the Newark earthworks, the beautiful, sophisticated geometrical forms, massive in the landscape, stretching miles across, perfect geometries using sacred number systems and geometries. They have the same kind of systems as used in Giza and used in ancient Britain. It just gets crazy, and yet it's all there. And like, there's only a handful of people who are kind of interested in it, me being one of them. So yeah, so I mean, it's an amazing landscape. People just don't realise the sort of deep prehistory and the Native Americans who were highly sophisticated and were involved in building all these amazing sites.